And my apologies, we're just getting into the studio today. So let's talk a little bit about like who y'all are. Kevin, could you just give us a small introduction of yourself?
Man, I don't know about a small one.
We've got 2 hours, so
I'm a pretty big deal. This might take a while. No, I'm originally from Connecticut. Grew up right outside of Hartford. Joined the Army in '99 and got plopped out here in Savannah. I got out of the Army in 2004 and started working for the Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. Worked there for my first time was about 3 years. Then I went out to the Mace Drug Task Force, worked narcotics out there, and then came back to Savannah. Was here for about 4 years, and then left there quite dramatically. But I've been kicking around Savannah ever since, like I said, 2004. I met Lou in 2007, right around then. We started working on some task force, organized crime, drug enforcement task force, and we got into a bunch of different stuff. And then Lou actually went through some stuff about the same time of my professional demise. We were going through it, and that's when all this stuff started. Books, podcasts, started screenwriting, which later led me to meet Jason, and that's how we got this thing going.
I think that's pretty cool. Your book is called
Black Sheep, White Cop, Savannah Exposed.
Right. And when that book came out, it had quite a bit of controversy, didn't it?
Well, controversy, but it got a lot of support.
Yeah,
I really did. I got a lot of support from local media.
It seemed like it was polarizing. Like you had people on both sides of the aisle. Like people that loved it and people that hated it.
Yeah, no, and the people that loved it came out in droves. Like I said, when I published the thing, I thought I'd give 50 of them away. It was supposed to be a coffee table piece,
right?
And we've sold thousands of the things.
Wow.
Jason and I have written the screenplay for it, and we're working with our buddy Billy Smith, who's a relatively successful Hollywood guy. Was just in The Irishman. He was our guest on our podcast a couple of weeks ago. But I've had a bunch of fun with it. And the funny part about the whole thing is I wouldn't have written the book if it weren't for Lou.
Oh, wow.
So that got started pretty much the same way.
Cool. Lou, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm originally from New York. Graduated from college. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I was down in the Bronx one day with a buddy of mine who I played football with in college, and at his brother's apartment. His brother came by, and he was a long-haired, cool-looking dude who happened to be a DEA agent, undercover DEA agent. And I talked with him for about 45 minutes, and I knew at that point what I wanted to do. And I started taking tests. I started working for a private investigator who was out of Long Island, and I got on with what is now known as ICE. Back then it was INS. And I was assigned to Los Angeles, and that's where I went out, and that's where I learned how to be a cop.
Oh, wow.
I worked the streets of L.A. I worked during the riots.
You were there during the L.A. riots?
I was.
Oh, dude.
I was on the streets during the riots.
I remember I literally was in 9th grade when the L.A. riots, I think, was it 89, 90?
I think he's calling you old, dude.
No. I was born in 76.
It was in the early 90s. It was 93, I believe.
Okay.
94.
I just remember, they told us, to be really careful, because I live in Cincinnati, and they had riots back in the 70s, and they thought that there were going to be riots, like, everywhere.
Erupting, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember that. It was like, it was pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it was crazy. I remember the first night when we got called in, driving up the 110 into the downtown. I was in the Rampart District at the time, and there were snipers on the overpasses. Buildings were being firebombed. It was like a scene out of a movie. It was insane.
Wow.
To be on the streets at that time, it was about a 3 or 4 day period where it was like going to war.
Oh, it's almost inconceivable, and on American soil,
Yeah.
it's not. It's as close as we've come, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just mind-boggling, to think about that.
Great place to learn how to be a cop, though.
Yeah.
It learned by fire, huh?
Yep.
Trial by fire.
Absolutely.
So, and Jason Usry, you are like the executive producer for the show, right?
Yeah. So
tell us a little bit about yourself. And quite a few people probably already know you because you do film and stuff like that in Savannah. And
yeah. So I was born in Dothan, Alabama. I grew up in Southwest Georgia. Went to school for mass media communications. Ended up in Savannah about 15 years ago, but I've been a screenwriter since I was in high school, and have at this point been fortunate enough to have a couple of projects produced. And I got connected with Kevin and Lou. I'd read a press release about a book signing that Kevin was doing in Richmond Hill about 8 months ago or so. And I just reached out to him and said, hey, man, I'd like to sit down with you and talk about, your writing and your process and all that stuff. And we sat down. What I thought was going to be a 20-minute chat ended up being a 2-hour-long chat.
That's awesome. Don't you love it when you have that? Like you're talking about, the guy up in New York, I think that's one of the best when you don't expect it to happen like that. And then you have, just a random conversation that turns into a friendship.
Absolutely.
No, and it was a fun meeting. I mean, I went in there with my cards. I was trying to learn the Hollywood game, and here's a guy who's already written a movie. It's just coming out, and I'm like, all right, let's see what this guy's about. And 3 minutes? I was like, this dude's cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, this will work.
Yeah. Yeah. So then Kevin introduced me to Lou, and they had told me that they were recording shows for a podcast, and I said, well, I might can help out with that. So they were cool enough to let me join on to the team. And
Lou, I keep seeing like you're like kind of like the binder in this little group here.
Well, I retired from ATF about 3 years ago, and Kevin and I decided to do this podcast. Like Kevin said earlier, when I retired, the plan was for me to write a book, and Kevin was encouraging me. And during that time, he was like, I'll write a book. And he actually got his done and got his out, and I'm still not even close. So it worked out great for Kevin. And then when we kind of came up with the podcast idea, we started out doing it, just basically two guys with a recorder, and talking about it's a law enforcement, military podcast. That's our primary audience. Is law enforcement officers.
That's a big segment of the population.
It is.
Too.
And we started out basically two guys with a recorder. And when Kevin found Jason and brought him into the mix, the podcast just kind of blossomed. And now we're on YouTube, on a YouTube channel. We're also still on the other platforms. But, for example, we just had Eddie Gallagher, the retired Navy SEAL, who's been all over the news in the last 9 months. We just had him on. He was our last guest. So it's picked up, and the three of us have kind of found a good working relationship, and it's starting to blossom.
And we need to take the opportunity to say that, if Jason didn't join up with this little crew, we'd have 70 recordings of something they're saying, dude, we got to figure out a way to get these on the air.
Yeah. Are y'all using Anchor as the host?
Yeah, that's the primary. That's the primary.
That's what I started doing. It's kind of weird you say YouTube, because when I first started the radio show, it's actually in June. It'll be 2 years I've been doing the radio show, but I had a little hiatus. I wanted to do the podcast, and I put it on YouTube. But the problem with putting it on YouTube, if it's not a video, is you have to convert it from an MP3 file to a video file, and then it takes forever to upload it. And so I was like, I did a couple episodes, and it was just so time consuming, and I quit doing it. And then a buddy of mine, Josh Vasquez, he wrote the Savannah Zombie novel series. He was doing Anchor FM. Found out it was free. Found out that it distributes to all of the major channels, and I was like, oh, let me do that. So I put like a bunch of episodes up on that, and then just recently I changed over to Libsyn, because I wanted to have more control over like my distribution. So like now I just have it on Libsyn, and I have it on Apple Podcasts right now. But that's one of my goals, is to get it out to other channels. Sure. And it's just a matter of time. Like you're talking about like the book thing. Yeah. It's you got to learn the process, and it's timing. Sometimes it might not. It might be the right thing, but the wrong time. I mean, it's just like anything else in life, you know. And I think with the podcast and the all the stuff, like all the different connections. I mean, you seem like a connector person. You got all of these different, I guess, skill sets that you can tap into with different folks.
Yeah, well, we find with the podcast that for us, it works when we're interviewing people to have it on video. We have some dynamic guests. We have these are our pipe hitters. These are undercover FBI agents, undercover ATF agents,
folks you wouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah, police chiefs from major cities.
Yeah.
Military guys, Navy SEALs, guys who have been to war and done that, and they're dynamic people, and I like to see them, when they talk and when they tell their stories.
Right.
And I think the audience does too.
Oh, we can get a lot more out of folks that way with that, face-to-face communication.
Yeah. Everybody, you're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. You would think I'd have that memorized by now, but I don't. I would actually read it off of there's a little sign in the back there.
I was wondering what you were looking at.
Yeah. But, so today's show, we have the End of Watch folks here with Kevin Grogan, Lou Valoze. Is it Italian or Sicilian?
It is Italian.
Italian, okay. And
Jason,
Jason,
we couldn't swear on the air.
Yeah, we can't swear.
The I word.
But so let's talk more about that production of getting the guests, and then obviously your backgrounds. You have all three of you. It seems like you have a good mesh together with the show. What's been something that you were kind of like, wow, I really didn't expect to have us be able to land that guest or get that interview or whatever?
Well, I can jump in here just for a second. Lou and Kevin both have provided a great deal of access to folks. So Jay Dobbins was, I think, our second video guest. And I had read his book. He wrote a book called No Angel back in 2009 or 10 or something like that. And I had picked that up in an airport shortly after it had been written.
Okay.
And read that book and was thought it was an incredible story and everything. And here I am, several years later, and he and Lou worked together on some undercover operations out in Arizona, right? Arizona, and so here's a guy who I had read a book of almost a decade ago, who's now on a podcast that I'm helping put together. So that was kind of an interesting, cool thing, and he was an incredibly passionate, fiery guest. Had some really great things to say. So that was one of the big ones for me. Of course, Eddie Gallagher that we just had on was a big get for us because he he's been in the news for the last almost year in a pretty big way, and hearing him share his side of the story when that was not he hadn't had that opportunity really to share his own words was great. He was our first. We were his first podcast. Interview. So yeah, that's a couple of mine.
And it kind of is a small world. Bootsy was a cop for a long time. I was a federal agent for 26 years. So there's a network there, and it's kind of it is somewhat of a small world. Like, just for an example, when we brought up Jay Dobbins, and his book No Angel was about his infiltration of the Hells Angels, and he was the first undercover agent to become a full-patched member of the Hells Angels. And when we brought him up on the Eddie Gallagher podcast, me and Bootsy, he let us know he was a big fan of Jay Dobbins. He had read the book and was a fan, so we connected those guys, and Jay sent him a signed copy of the book, and so it just shows you, that world, even the special ops military world, and the federal law enforcement world is kind of a small world, which is pretty cool.
No, it is, and a lot of it, it's pretty tight. The relationships you form in a law enforcement career is pretty tight, especially when you're highly specialized like Lou was. Those guys, you got to know the people that you're working around real close and real well. So
imagine you have to be able to trust them with everything.
Oh yeah, and then you get a dynamic personality on top of that. Like Bird wrote No Angel and Catching Hell is the second one, both New York Times bestsellers. So the exposure of that, and it takes off from there, because I mean, we've met a lot of really interesting, lot of really dynamic guys, and you got to factor in the luck factor on a lot of it. Like, we've taken a self-published book, and because of a connection that my brother had, meet up with a guy who's been in The Departed, been in The Irishman, been in a number of Peter Berg films and that kind of stuff, and it gets going. But then you take a guy, a local guy I never would have met if I didn't sell a book in Richmond Hill. Right. And Jason comes in, and again, a bunch of recordings become a podcast that's out now, and we're hitting pretty good numbers now. So there's been a lot of luck, but it's
actually I've got a funny story how I actually met Jason. I think somebody had, I don't know, we were Facebook connected first, and this one day I was I was over at Ed Susevich's house recording a show. A guy named Gary John Bishop. He does like leadership and stuff like that. And I had to stop at the gas station, which is like right down the street. And this guy is got like these like red. Like,
I almost wore those shoes today.
I swear,
and I didn't, because I was like,
I swear, it was so funny. I got out of the car and I was like, man, this is so cool red shoes. And it was so weird because later on that day, you sent me a message saying, "Hey, that was me at the gas station." I was like, "What? Did
you see me at the gas station?"
We had never met in person, and then you, like, I think the first time we actually were like face to face talking was at that little podcaster group. I've got this little thing called Savannah Podcaster Association, and a couple of us just got together, just people that we're into doing podcasting and stuff, and we got together and just hanging out and. I don't know. We were just chit-chatting about getting the group together and coming out on the show today, and I'm glad we were all able to make it happen.
Absolutely.
So
no, this is cool. We appreciate the opportunity. Any exposure you get is good, and especially, our niche is law enforcement related. We're trying to branch out and get as many listeners as we can of different interests. I always want to hear other people's opinions on.
Well, and I personally think a lot of law enforcement get a bad rap. And I feel like it's important for people to see, hey, there are actually a lot, like 99% of all the people that you're ever going to meet in law enforcement are good, decent people, that they're there to protect people. It's just kind of like that rule of, one bad apple. Those are the ones that get all the attention. And
that's what CNN and MSNBC want you to see, and nobody's perfect, but a lot of those situations that you see in mass media are terribly misrepresented. I mean, Eddie Gallagher's case is a perfect example of it. That guy was accused of being a war criminal, and they said all these things, and having vast amounts of experience with it. He had to sit back for at least 8 months and just bite his lip. Couldn't defend himself, couldn't say a thing. And of course, everybody takes his silence as, he must be guilty if he's not saying anything. No, it's the legal process.
Right.
But the other side, they can say whatever they want about it, and you just got to sit there and take it. And that's not, that's how law enforcement has developed a bad public image, because the media says things, and police officers, and especially city departments and federal agencies, have to be quiet about it. They're not going to say anything until everything is run through court, and they can speak about it.
That has to go through the judicial process, right?
And it's dangerous when the media puts out a false narrative, because people believe it. People believe what's in the media. And when I went to Eddie Gallagher's retirement party, which the guys from 9 Line put on at 17 South at the gun club, and I took a picture with him, me and Michael Brooks of South Magazine, and Eddie Gallagher, and Michael Brooks put it on the Instagram site for South Magazine, and you got to see the hatred from people that came out. Just saying, you guys are taking pictures with a war criminal. I'm just spewing venom, hatred. People who don't really know the story.
And spewing it at a guy like Michael Brooks, who does nothing but support people in his community, give them opportunities and puts them in a high-quality magazine. And then you're going to come at a guy like that and say, you're supporting a worker. It's like, come on, man. It's just, that's not right.
Well, it's crazy because I feel that we all have the freedom of speech, but doesn't mean that you have freedom of consequences. You know, and if you
it's freedom of responsibility too.
Well, yeah, if you publish something that is false, you know, you should be held responsible for that. And I think with social media, we have so many instances now where people just jump to conclusions and they don't want to hear both sides of the story. Like you said, the false narratives, you know, and I thought it was kind of cool because, like, you know, you meet people. I met you, Kevin, at my author expo because you'd sent me a message saying, hey, I've got this book. And I'd heard of the book before.
It's funny in a small town, though, that we hadn't crossed paths sooner. You know, it's just great because, you know, in my head, I'm like, I've sold this many books. Everybody's heard of it. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, I'd heard of the book, but I don't actually solicit authors, you know, to come out to my events. I just, you know, like some of the people like I know, I'll ask them, but I don't, you know, say, hey, like, if I didn't know you, Jason, I'd be like, hey, Jason, you know, I've got this book thing. I'd like to have you out there. I wouldn't do that.
Sure.
But
see, we're shameless about that with our podcast. We're like, hey, we got a podcast. Come on. You're not doing anything Thursday. Come on.
So it was nice to meet you. And I used to work at University of Phoenix I was a financial aid advisor, and we had a criminal justice program. So we had precinct commanders that were teaching there. We had officers that were going to school there, trying to, you know, get their degree so that they could get a promotion, you know, that kind of thing. And yeah, you get to know people, you get to meet people, and I think one of the biggest things that is kind of a disconnect right now in the public, especially with social media, is you get this image of, you know, the bad guy, you know, and it's sensational and it's, you know, whatever. And then especially when it's supposed to be a person that's protecting the law, you know, you get this, you know, you're going to get somebody who's a rogue, you know, they're not following the rules or they're doing whatever. And then they take that and they're like, oh, well, everybody's like this. And that's just fallacy of logic. It's not true.
Well, and the exposure that it gets, you know, because everybody wants to see it. It just seems like a lot of people are they're drawn to a negative story, and they want to believe the worst things. But, you know, I've been on a bunch of these shows and talked about it, and the line that always comes in, you know, a bad police officer, like an actual crook, that is so much the exception. It's not the rule. But that's not the way it's portrayed.
Right,
you know,
right.
Look at the movies in Hollywood that come out or are popular and stuff. It's all about crooked and corrupt police officers, and
well, you know,
that's what everybody wants to see.
The thing too is like you can go on the FBI's website and you can look at statistics. You know, last year there were only, I mean, I say only, but out of all the crimes in the U.S. that were reported, 8,000 crimes were considered hate crimes. You know, 8,000 out of 335 million people, you know.
Yeah.
So when you look at numbers like that, you're like, well, is it really an epidemic like they want you to think? Or is it, you know, is it a problem we should address? Yeah. You know, but is it as bad as, you know, people want you to think? So that's one of the reasons why I like to be able to talk to folks. You know, this is actually the first time I've ever had, you know, somebody from law enforcement, you know, background come on and talk on the show. But
the huge thing is when you're dealing with law enforcement situations, you literally are in many cases talking about life and death situations.
Right.
So when somebody's killed in an incident, which are always unfortunate, even if it's a perfectly justified, perfectly explainable, you know, the bad guy pointed a gun at the good guys and the good guy shot and killed the bad guy. It's somebody's dying. Okay, it's a tragic experience. And, you know, Lou and I have worked with, alongside, around, across from several quote-unquote bad guys. You know, they are criminals. They're not bad people.
Right.
I can tell you in my career of thousands of arrests, I think 7 or 8 people that I've ever arrested were truly bad people. Of those thousands, a lot of them did really bad things, but they weren't evil people. They're just, you know, regular people in extraordinary circumstances, and they reacted poorly, you know. But I mean, when it's police officers doing it, it gets magnified because, again, it's, you know, the government oppressing citizens, and that just hasn't been my experience ever in this profession.
Yeah, I agree with you. We got to do a little break. Sebastian, do you mind playing a little bit for us? And this is Sebastian Messer. This is my son, everybody. You met him earlier, but he plays heavy metal, and he also plays some acoustic music. Thank you, Bass.
Rock on.
That's awesome.
Very good.
Everybody, you're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
This portion of WRUU LP Savannah Soundings programming is brought to you by listeners and the Ships of the Sea Museum. One of the hidden secrets of the Ships of the Sea Museum is its gardens. Native plants are interspersed with exotic tropical plants throughout the gardens. Visitors to Savannah can bring in their takeout meals and dine among the trident maples and use the complimentary Wi-Fi. You can find out more about the Ships of the Sea Museum at the website shipsofthesea.org.
Hello, Radio Land. You are listening to WRUU LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
I had actually never heard that station ID before. It's kind of neat. So, anyway, everybody, if you're just now tuning in, this is the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer. And my special guests today are the End of Watch, Bootsy and Sal. Can I call y'all Bootsy and Sal?
Mm-hmm.
Please do.
Okay.
I was going to say, that was a record time. He's never used my name, Kevin, that many times as long as I've known you.
Awesome.
Did I use it?
Collective. Dude, you called me Kevin like 37 times.
I gotta stop that.
That's awesome. So, Bootsy is Kevin Grogan, right?
Yes, sir.
And Sal is Lou Valoze.
You nailed it.
All right, I'm finally getting it. And then Jason Usry. Am I saying Usry right? Yep. Okay. I always feel like it's so crazy. You know, you want to say people's names correctly, but sometimes, you know, your brain kind of gets twisted up and you're like, did I just call you? Like, I was at the bookstore earlier and I was like, I know your name's not Monica. And she said Miriam. And I was like, okay, hey, Miriam. Well, I come back around. I was going to buy a book. And I was like, it's good talking with you, Miriam. And she goes, oh no, my name's Caitlin. And I was like, I thought I couldn't remember your name. So it was just funny. I was like, you know, so I was like, okay, Caitlin, it's cool. You know,
we got to get Jason out on the street so he can pick up a label because it's not, you know,
right?
Yeah, a moniker.
Yeah. He's got to get some street cred.
Right.
You be the AV tech.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, right before the break, we were talking about, I feel like kind of like credibility in the community, you know, and I feel it's important to show the good side of, you know, what we're doing, you know, in the community. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I mean, by we, I mean like socially, society.
Yep.
And I think it's good to show the other side because often, like you said earlier, law enforcement, they don't get the opportunity because of the judicial system to say, hey, this is my side of the story. You know, people are just kind of inundated with the negative story over and over and over again until it almost seems like that narrative is the only truth.
But the thing is,
if you want to, Bootsy and I addressed this issue in one of our episodes. If you want to check it out, listeners, one of our episodes with Baltimore City Police Chief Melvin Russell.
Great guest.
He's a law enforcement teacher and a preacher.
Real police.
Yep, retired Baltimore Police Chief Melvin Russell, who addresses Bootsy and I lay it out with him. And
give me like the summary of that.
Well, first of all, this guy's an amazing orator. And I could listen to this guy speak all day long. And you know, he grew up in Baltimore City.
Cool.
Okay, so he came from
Maryland.
there.
That's like Baltimore's kind of a.
It's a rough town. Man.
Yeah,
it's a rough city, and he talks about the ins and outs of policing and the importance of community policing. And he's not just giving some generic term. He's talking about being from a place, all right, growing up there, understanding it, and then becoming a law enforcement officer.
These are your
there.
folks. This is your tribe.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the importance of that relationship between the community and between the police officers. Mm-hmm. But we all, you know, Bootsy and I always talk about the good and the bad. We talk about everything that's right with law enforcement and the justice system.
You just present the facts.
Well, we also talk about everything that's wrong with law enforcement and the justice system. Mm-hmm. But I think Chief Mel really spelled out what has happened in society and what is the blame in society, where the blame is going to law enforcement a lot on the media, but it's breakdowns and failures in our society, in our family structure.
Yeah.
You know, in our inner cities, you know, and everyone's just blaming the police, which is easy to do.
It's easy because they're the authority, and of course, everybody wants to fight back at it.
Yeah. And Chief Mel talks about how business used to be handled between people. Problems were resolved, you know, within the community. But now everyone's like, hey, they just call the cops, you know, and then the cops are the bad guys.
Cancel culture stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I've been bringing up lately is a faux pas. I mean, how many times do you stick your foot in your mouth? Like, oh, man, back in the day, you know, my bad. I stuck my foot in my mouth as a faux pas. And it was over, you know, and it's like today you flub up and.
Oh, it's all over Instagram. It's on Facebook.
Did you see Adam called her Miriam? And
Can you
her
believe
name
he
was
said
Caitlin?
that?
I'm like, oh,
How
and not them.
He's gender insensitive.
Well, it's crazy because you know people get so out of whack. You know, it's almost like reasonable common sense is lacking.
Common sense is a difficult term because you know what's common to you isn't necessarily common to me, isn't necessarily common to somebody else. But it's funny how people forget that they're fallible too.
Oh,
and everybody's so quick to judge what somebody else does. You know, I catch myself doing it. I'm like, and then I'm like, well, I'm fine with him, like I said.
Yeah.
You know, if I ever take 5 seconds to pause and think about it before I say something, I'm like, maybe it's not as bad
I've
as
been
I
working
thought.
on trying not to judge people. Like I used to think like, why are you acting so dumb? You know, why would you do something so stupid? And now I'm thinking like, well, maybe, you know, maybe it was just something that was an accident or an honest mistake or whatever, you know?
Sometimes maybe give somebody the chance to explain why they did something so they can say,
Benefit of the
you know
doubt.
what, that was a dumb thing of me to do. Oops.
Yeah. I've been trying to be better with that.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to step back and say, have I earned the right to judge this person? Right?
Oh, my
Am
God.
I worthy to judge this person?
That is a good question.
Am I living the life, right, the lifestyle that allows me to be judgmental of someone
man,
else,
you just got me right here, bro. I mean, like that one. Oh my God, have I earned that right? Like, no, I haven't.
Well, we've been in situations where people who have no right to critique how we get down have sat back and done it. So
Yeah. I appreciate y'all sharing that. So, you guys, with your background and basically the history. I mean, like you got over 40-something years of law enforcement together, and then Jason, you got, you know, all this production.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you've done. Can we talk a little bit more about your production stuff? Like, you know, like because the folks in Savannah, they probably might know a little bit about you.
Yeah.
But can we talk about like your, you know, what's your, you know,
background?
Yeah.
No. So, my most of my career I've spent in television video production. Mm-hmm. I went to school and I got a degree in mass media communication, and my goal coming out of that was to be a filmmaker, screenwriter and filmmaker. And when I graduated, I went home to kind of try to figure out if I wanted to go to LA or what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting a job in television in Tallahassee, Florida. And so I was there for a couple years. I came to Savannah. I was still and am currently still in television video production, but have continued on writing and developing my my skills outside of just shooting and editing video.
And you had recently this last year you had your movie.
Yeah, so
that was optioned, right?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of movies in the last 18 months that have released. One was a family film called Running from My Roots, which I was hired to come on as to do the rewrite for that, some polishing it up, and then I had written a movie a couple of years ago, which was a suspense thriller called Dead Water, and that movie we had a financier lined up. I wrote the script, and then that financier dropped out, and so the project sat on the shelf for a year, 18 months. Mm-hmm. And then a new financier came in, and it was produced in pretty short order after that. We shot in 2018. We wrapped in Labor Day of 2018. and then released in theatrically in August of last year, and then on DVD, Blu-ray streaming, and all that in September. And that stars Casper Van Dien and Judd Nelson, and we shot down in St. Croix, and most of it on a boat, as Kevin mentioned earlier.
I watched the movie. At first, it was like I just wanted to watch it because I wanted to support you and see it or whatever. And then
I appreciate that.
I got the autographed copy, y'all. I bought the autographed copy. I was like, Jason,
I'm still waiting for my poster.
All right,
I got
but I watched it, and it's just a like the cinematography is beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, like it really is. Like if you want to just daydream about going on a cruise or something like that, the opening scene of the movie is just like, I want to go there and have a
easy
vacation.
to do in St. Croix. It's a beautiful place, that's for sure. But yeah, no, really fortunate to have that project produced and released and everything. And there are some more, like Kevin mentioned, we got his book in the works. I'm working with Lou some on his story as well, which he also has an incredible, unbelievable story.
Will be a great book.
Yeah.
All in due time, right?
That's it.
Like I love that. Like have I earned that right to judge? Yeah, because sometimes I can imagine you need to think about yourself too. Like have I, am I judging myself too harshly? Because I'll be honest with you, I had a couple of books that I put out this last year, and I learned a big mistake was don't put a book out around Christmas or New Year's. I put 2 books out. I put my second vampire novel, Blood Thrasher, Vinyl All Night. Put that out on Christmas. No, I'm sorry. I put my poetry book out on Christmas, and I put the vampire book out on New Year's, a week out from each other. And it's just it's kind of been flatlined.
Yeah.
But it's still there. So I had to go back, and I'm like an Excel. I love Excel. So I use Google Sheets and I use Excel. So yesterday I actually wrote out a publishing schedule and like a little word tracker and all that stuff, so I could keep myself in line with, okay, well, I have these projects. Here's my deadline. I need to get kicking. I need to start writing. And
that's a discipline of giving yourself those deadlines. But I tell you, the one thing that I found, and I never expected to write anything, never thought about it. Again, that started with a conversation with Lou. We were talking about Bird, I think, and Jay Dobbins had his book out, and Lou's like, you know what, I'm going to write one, because Lou's career, I kind of take it for granted because I've known him so long, and worked alongside on some projects, but his professional career would spanned, however, 26 years, I think.
Yep.
All right. Starting from where he started with immigration in Los Angeles, early 90s, you're talking South Central L.A., gangs, all this kind of stuff, the L.A. riots. And he was working in a position where he's in the L.A. County Jail talking to, foreign nationals, looking at their, immigration status and having to speak Spanish, but learning the different cultures of that, which is gang central, and then changing agencies to where you're working. And I don't think a lot of people understand what ATF does. Okay, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, explosives, and they got to.
When I think of ATF, I think of cigarettes and beer.
And a lot of people.
Yeah, that's what I think
Most
of.
do either. Yeah.
But a lot of people on like the NRA side of things, they look at it like, oh, the ATF, they're trying to take our guns, they're trying to regulate this, and Second Amendment guys are all. It's that my experience with the ATF has been they reduce violent crime in this country any way they possibly can. Of course, the famous agencies that you see in movies and that kind of stuff usually start with an F, but we can't curse on the air, and then DEA.
Thank you for catching
but those
yourself,
other things, they're out there, and that's the glamorous thing. But the guys in my professional career, the guys who are actually in the community, actually making a difference, taking guns, working gangs, and reducing violent crime in cities is the ATF. And for the listeners that don't know that,
they probably wouldn't know that. I mean, I had no idea.
But I would say without exception. I mean, there are some different field offices, different agencies that go about things different. But my professional experience is if we had a gang and we wanted to get rid of them, we went to the ATF, we went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we made things happen. But the stories that you will hear, and Lou's a dynamic guy, even though he's being quiet on the radio, he's a very dynamic guy. So when you hear the stories and the way they're told, I say, how many movies have there been and how many books have there been about the infiltration of biker gangs and stuff like that?
Right.
Incredible stuff. And I think guys like Billy Queen and Jay Dobbins did a masterful job of telling those stories. Lou's story is stuff that people have never heard about. Like, wouldn't even fathom, and going just down to the, when he left college and was working with a private investigator. A couple little stories, but it's his ability to tell those stories that I think are going to make his book unbelievable.
I don't want to interject here real quick because I know you want to say something. I have a friend named Rachel that is doing that true crime. It's going to be later on this year. I'm going to have to introduce you all to her because she's got a convention that she's doing here in Savannah. I actually had her on my show not too long ago. But there was a series called True Crime back in the 90s, and they would feature, it was kind of like Forensic Files type show.
Okay.
And they would feature stuff about cases and things like that. So I'm going to have to introduce you all so you can, because she's got a big convention that she's going to be doing, and it would be I think right up your all's alley.
Can we sell books and make money?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does she need speakers?
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to introduce y'all because I think, she would be a great fit for, having, because the folks that would be coming out are all, I'm a big forensic file junkie, and I like true crime and stuff like that. And, when I was talking to Jason, he was, talking about getting y'all on, I was like, oh, this would be so cool because, a lot of times those shows, you don't get the real story. I feel like you get the Hollywood version of it.
People have no idea what
right.
Really
and
happens.
when you get to the grit and the grind of stuff, you're like, that's what it is, or that's what it was.
If you can find someone who's been there and done that, and someone who's willing to tell how it really happened,
right?
And I'm going to bring it back to the podcast. And Bootsy, I do agree with you that I am a dynamic individual. I do.
Oh! Hold on.
That's can we record that? Because that's the first time he's agreed with me in about 13 years.
Awesome.
But on a serious note,
you heard it here first.
Back to the podcast. Like I said earlier, Bootsy and I don't just talk about the successes of law enforcement and ourselves personally, but we also talk about the failures and what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed. And one of our guests, and another great episode for you to go back and check out, is Kent Terry.
Kent Terry, okay.
He is the brother of Brian Terry, who was the slain Border Patrol officer. I don't know if you've heard. It's been all over the news. He was killed with a gun from ATF's Fast and Furious program.
Oh, wow.
Which is blamed on ATF, but was involving
there was
a bunch of other agencies all the way up.
Wow.
DEA, FBI, CIA were all culpable. ATF seemed to be caught holding the bag at the end. But Brian Terry was killed. He was a Border Patrol officer, a warrior, and some cartel guys were coming over. They were engaged in a gunfight, and he was killed. And it turns out one of the guns recovered was a gun that ATF had known about. They were conducting just a terrible operation. I don't know who thought of it, and I do know, and who gave it that rubber stamp. But they allowed these guns to be walked to Mexico. They knew gun trafficking was going on. Guns were going, from federally licensed firearms dealers in Arizona right to the hands of the cartel.
Oh, wow.
Okay, ATF monitored it in some failed attempt to take down these cartel guys, in this gun trafficking scheme. They let thousands of guns walk over the border. And
How could that end badly?
Yeah, right.
Right.
And then one of our Border Patrol agents is killed with one of those guns. So his brother...
so you can see the direct correlation between the actions and the result.
Absolutely.
And his brother's an absolute warrior, too. He picked up his guidon and just went...
He wants answers. He wants answers from the United States government. How could this happen? More importantly, how could no one have been held responsible?
Wow.
Eric Holder, this happened under the previous administration. They could not get any answers. They're trying Kent Terry's trying for this administration. And, this is a guy he's on the news all the time. And he has had sit-downs with our president. He's trying to get this uncovered, how this could happen. So again, Bootsy and I are showing, we love to beat our chests and show what's good about, law enforcement today and the justice system. But just as importantly, we have guests on and we like to talk about what's wrong and what needs fixing.
I think that's so important because I use my show for the same kind of thing. I talk to like authors, artists, and then entertainers, and I try to provide a platform for people that they might not have a voice in the community or they might need, without telling their story. I don't want to tell their story. I want them to be able to tell their story. And, you see, I think a lot of times you see people that they're misrepresented or stereotyped, you see that a lot. And when you sit down and you talk with a person, like you said, most of the people that you ever arrested, they were not bad people. They did bad things, but they ultimately weren't a bad person. So if you're showing the good side and the bad side, and I'm sure, Sal, with you, you've seen bad people.
Yes.
Yeah. It just depends on what you're doing and what area, I mean, growing up, my family on my dad's side, we didn't have anything to do with them because they were drug runners and felons and, a lot of things. I didn't want to have anything to do with them. My dad had nothing to do with them. My dad wasn't a criminal, but you see that kind of stuff and you're like, I don't want to be around that. I don't want to be part of that, and then you get people that they get caught up in. It's crazy, but I was just listening to a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers. And he talks a lot about Kansas City style policing for traffic stops. And he talks about like there's a study where crime is concentrated in small areas and like little pockets. So like if you got one neighborhood, and I remember this growing up in Cincinnati and Price Hill, you had like a block that was like, you don't go on that block. Yep. But right next to that block was fine. And he was talking about a lot of times it was concentrated in one little area.
That's
or whatever.
downtown Savannah. I mean,
you can go. You can see it here in Savannah. You can see poverty, and then right next to it, $1 million homes.
That's it.
Black Sheep Boy Cop.
Yeah, I tried to on the cover of my book. I tried to show the juxtaposition there. You have the 400 block of east. Like that. I'm a writer. You have 400 block of East again? Charlton Street, and then you have the 600 block of East Gwinnett Lane, and it shows you those. I could throw a football from one side to the other.
Oh yeah.
But the way we put it together was you can see, rich Savannah and poor Savannah right on top of each other. And people.
Do you guys remember that Lance Crackers that used to have like the little panel vans that drive and deliver?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So like that was one of my jobs when I was 20. It was like 2002, 2003, something like that. And I had Augusta Avenue. I had MLK. I had Montgomery Street, and I had parts of 80. It was my route. So it was,
depending on what part of 80, that can be.
It was right there that butts up to, Chatham Parkway, past Chatham Parkway.
Okay.
Okay.
So I had like that whole little corridor, going down Augusta Avenue and all that back and forth. And I would be done by 2:00. I did not want to be out there past 2 just because of the neighborhoods and and it was not really a good neighborhood. Now, a lot of those areas have been gentrified and been changed. So people are not
Montgomery Street corridor, man. It doesn't even look the same.
No, I mean like that whole I remember the housing development over there, like B Road, Henry Street, the one that was like right there by the overpass. There was like a housing development that they tore down. They've got like condos there now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're talking East Broad and Gwinnett.
Yeah, and
it's beautiful. And right across the street, which I write about extensively in the book, Black Sheep, White Cop, Savannah Exposed. The 500 block of Bolton,
Bolton,
Wahlberg, Park, and Duffy.
I had all of those,
like Beirut.
Like
man.
every little C store in that area was mine, and so I had all of those. And I would literally want to be done by 2:00 in the afternoon because I did not want to be out there by 3 because everybody started coming out and hanging out. And
but that's in the part of that is a misconception. A lot of people think, when the sun goes down, that's when it gets worse. Oh no, where you have neighborhoods like that, it's just that activity is 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
You see it more beginning, like you said, right about 2:00 in the afternoon. But that's when guys who've been up dealing drugs all night. That's when they're waking up and rolling back out.
I had a crazy story. There was a store on MLK that I went to, and then I went to one on Montgomery Street, and by the time I wasn't even in and out of the store in 5 minutes. I was in and out in 5 minutes. Had my, I already knew what I was going to deliver. By the time I come back out, my truck had been robbed. And the only reason why I found out about it was because I went to the next stop and I was looking for oatmeal cream pies. And I only had one box of oatmeal cream pies. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I saw I was missing beef jerky, oatmeal cream pies. And I went back to the other stop where there were like a bunch of people sitting around like on a stoop.
Eating oatmeal cream pies.
Yeah.
And I was like, I said, did anybody see anything? I said, I got $100 for anybody saw anything. Nothing. Nobody saw anything. And it turned out like I had to do an audit. I had like $600 worth of stuff stolen in 5 minutes. I mean, it was like in and out. Boom, boom,
people
boom.
underestimate the ability. People think there's always the misconception that criminals are stupid. I'll tell you what, people who take to crime as a career, they're just as professional about it as anybody else in any other trade. Some of them are they're really good at it.
Yeah. All right. This is going to be, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back at 4 o'clock for the second hour. And so you listen to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
This is WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. This is